Welcome to In Light of Spirit. Welcome back. I'm Andre. For those of you that don't know, for those of you that are just tuning in to this channel, so welcome. Just to give you a bit of a breakdown for how we usually do this, we discuss topics on this channel, and I usually go over some research that I've done myself. Then I go over my personal experience with the topic, and then the best way that we get into the spiritual aspect of these things, and really the subconscious aspect of these things, is by getting into dreams and dream interpretation. But at the end of the day, really all spirituality is understanding things from a human perspective. You know, all spirituality is just looking at yourself deeply as a human. It's to call it anything else is really you're just creating this grandiose narrative. You know, spirituality is just a part of being human. It's just a part of being human. It's just a part of understanding yourself on a deeper level, and understanding maybe perhaps nature on a deeper level, and how we interact with nature, and how we collaborate with nature. You know, we collaborate with the universe, and I guess what some would call the divine, you know, the divine energies in the universe. So that's really all spirituality is. That's what I would define spirituality as, and I'm sure many of you would define it as different, but personally, that's what I define spirituality as. I define it as really just looking at ourselves on a deeper level, looking at each other on a deeper level. You know, paying attention to things that are not necessarily out in the open, you know, things are a little more on the invisible side of things. You know, you have the light and the dark. So you have things that reflect light, and then you have shadows that absorb light. So today I will repeat this, but I'm a bit nervous just because of the topic. It's a very archaic topic, and it's, you know, it's a topic that many people are affected by, and this is probably gonna spur some conversations. And you might end up a little bit triggered by what we're talking about. So today's discussion is going to be about pro-choice. And I think most of you can kind of gather or figure out where I'm going with this. So let me just kind of break down at least a book definition of pro-choice. So Foreign Policy Association's definition of pro-choice means respecting that an individual has her or his own value and belief system, and that this will guide their choices in terms of right? So when we look at this in terms of sexual health, pro-choice can mean that pro-choice is all about giving individuals the opportunity to make their own choices about sexuality, relationships, contraceptives, reproduction health, and here we go, like this is really what we're going to get into, but being pro-choice means that it's up to you to make your own educated decisions on things like abortion. So abortion rights. And maybe I should have called this episode Abortion Rights, but I chose pro-choice. I made that choice. I made an educated choice. I was pro-choice about choosing pro-choice. So just further looking at pro-choice, where was I? So being pro-choice means that we respect the right of the individual woman or man to make an informed choice if they are faced with unplanned pregnancy. We believe that these choices include the choice to continue the pregnancy and keep the child, the choice of continuing with pregnancy followed by adoption, and the choice to access free, legal, confidential, safe abortion. So being pro-choice, doesn't necessarily mean you're pro-abortion. So I feel like that's a common misconception with being pro-choice. But you can be someone that personally is opposed to abortion or feel uncomfortable with it, but would not, if you're pro-choice, just because you're anti-abortion, just because you don't really feel comfortable with it, being somebody that is pro-choice, you would still not try to push your agenda or your moral, personal, or religious views onto someone else, onto another woman, or try to restrict a woman's access to abortion, or judge a woman for her decisions, whether it be abortion or what got her there. So it is possible to, be personally opposed to abortion yet pro-choice, because you're not pushing your agenda, you're not pushing your beliefs on someone else. I think when it comes to being pro-choice, again, it is a misconception. I think that I think the key word there is choice. I think the key word with pro-choice is choice. And what we really need to understand about the phrase pro-choice is that it's not based off your beliefs. It's based off the choices you make and making sure that they're informed. Your choices are informed decisions. So I think it's really, really important to not get too caught up with abortion rights with this phrase too when you hear it, because as much as it is, pro-choice is a very big part of talking about abortion rights, they don't necessarily, just because you're talking about pro-choice doesn't necessarily mean you're talking about abortion. Pro-choice is associated with abortion rights a lot, and definitely women's rights a lot, but pro-choice in itself can mean many things. So I think we need to need to understand that, especially when using this phrase, because a lot of people use it. A lot of people use this phrase when talking about abortions, but sometimes you're not even talking about abortion when you're, when we're talking about the true definition of pro-choice. I'm going to move on now to my journal entry and really talk about my personal experience with or at least my personal views. And this might be the shortest video that I have out there. So we'll see. We'll see how much, if people interact with me, that'd be great, because as far as the subject goes, I can only have so much to say about abortion rights, because I'm not a woman. I'm not a woman. However, I did grow up with all women, and the women that I grew up with were very, very, I want to say, I grew up with a lot of strong women. There's definitely more of a matriarchal atmosphere, the way that I grew up. The way that, within my childhood, there was a lot more matriarchy. And so, by default, I look at patriarchy and I'm just like, whatever, dude. Whatever. I think patriarchy can be very... I think patriarchy can be kind of out of date. That's what I'll say. However, growing up in the matriarchal atmosphere that I grew up in, I will say, I want to turn the lighting up. Let's turn this lighting up a little bit. There we go. That's much better. So, I will say that growing up in the matriarchal atmosphere that I grew up in, and you know, I can also mention that I was pretty much the only male really around. In my immediate family, you know, I was really the only male around. And so I can honestly say that as much as I think that patriarchy, you know, and how much patriarchy dominates our world still, I think it's out of date. I think that ever since Me Too happened, you know, and Me Too was not the first women's movement ever. We've had plenty of women's movements throughout history. The most recent one that was still going on, by the way, like it pretty much influenced it and probably pushed Me Too, you know, was Women's Lib, and that happened throughout, you know, the modern women's movement, Women's Lib, throughout the 60s, 70s, and, you know, that carried through the 90s, and it's still, you know, Me Too is basically a rebranding of that, I feel. So, when it comes to matriarchy and patriarchy, I do feel that really we just need to learn to have a balance between the two. We need both. You can't just have one or the other. You really need both, and we need to learn to balance the two better. And it kind of goes back to a lot of the things that I've mentioned with my other episodes, where it's like, you guys, this is about togetherness. It's about togetherness. We're pack animals. So that being said, I did, you know, I've seen what women go through. I've seen how living in a more patriarchally I see what women go through, excuse me, and I've seen how living in a more patriarchally influenced society tends to treat women, especially women that are a lot more willful and, you know, strong-willed and a lot more independent and, you know, dare I say modern, you know. I've seen what they go through. I've seen what women go through. On a personal level, like, I was the one that had to go buy my mother or my sister's tampons. You know, I was the one that did that. I lived in a small town, and I was the one buying them their tampons and making a tampon run and stuff like that. I was the, you know, I've seen a lot of what women go through. I've seen how women get treated in relationships too, and I've seen what a codependent woman looks like versus an independent woman. I can speak from the perspective of somebody that grew up around women in a very matriarchal atmosphere, and I will say that when it comes to matriarchy versus patriarchy, I think we need to move into a direction where we make room for both. You know, there needs to be a balance. I believe that the subject is very case-by-case material. I see big two controversies with the subject. One, you have women's rights, and then you have murdering an unborn child. Those are essentially the two arguments that we have when you talk pro-choice, when you talk abortion. Women have all the same rights as men, which includes how they choose to nurture their bodies. No one has the right to tell a person how to treat their body. And moreover, if a woman decides that she doesn't want to birth a child, then it is her body. You know, birthing a child takes a lot of responsibility and energy. I happen to love children. I think that every child deserves to be in a nurturing environment full of support and proper nourishment. And let's just put it in the case of a 16-year-old. A 16-year-old girl living in poverty. Let's say she births a child, you know. Let's say that she has her kid at 16, living in poverty. Is it really worth it? for anybody, think about it, you guys. Is it really worth it? I ask it because the child can end up malnourished, it can end up desensitized, it can spend the majority of its life as a, there's no childhood there. You spend the majority of your life suffering and being in survival mode. So let's put the relationships into perspective too. Do you think that the relationships between the parents are going to be good, and not just good, but are they going to be a good example for this kid to grow up watching? And with all the struggle that's going to happen within the family, is this child even going to have a good example of what a family looks like? Or a stable house? Like, all these factors need to be considered before bringing another life into this world. And again, so is it really worth it for anybody? Let's put it in the perspective of the woman. What is her body going through, you guys? What are you putting your body through? And for what? So you can have a kid, raise a kid in poverty? What? I grew up in poverty, okay? And I love my mother very much. I'm happy that she kept me. I'm happy to be here. Don't get me wrong. But I think of all the things that we went through and all the things that I didn't have growing up, the things that I still don't have as an adult, the things that I've had to work really hard to get as an adult. I think of all of these things, and considering all of that, was it worth it? For those that are pro-life and very anti-abortion, it seems like this question, you guys seem to avoid this question a lot, and I've watched you do it a couple of times. Because this isn't the only time that I've had this conversation with people, but when it comes to abortion and pro-life, what if the mother is pregnant because she got raped? Do you expect this mother to have a child that came from rape so that she can be reminded every day by looking at this kid's face that she got raped? Think about it. It's going to be hard to love a child that I had because I got raped. And for those of you that we'll make a video about sexual assault sooner or later, but for those of you that have been through sexual assault, and I'm sure there are plenty of you that have, I'm sure about 90% of the people, if not more, watching this video right now have been sexually assaulted in some form, or sexually harassed. You know how traumatic that is. You know what it does to you, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, when you are sexually assaulted, raped, sexually harassed, all of the above. You know what that does to you. Imagine if you got raped and then got pregnant from being raped. And then imagine if we had laws where you had to have that baby, which in some states in this country right now, there are laws. There are some states will not let you have abortions in that state right now. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having to have a child and look at somebody, look at the face every day of the person that raped you? Considering all that, who are you? Who am I? Who is any of us to tell another person what they can and can't do with their body to that extremity? And as a person of the LGBTQ community, as a gay man, I live with enough people because of their religion trying to tell me what I can and can't do with my body, enough as it is with, and that's just my sexuality. I have enough people trying to tell me what I can and can't do with my body in that sense. But can you imagine someone trying to tell you what to do after being raped? And I've had people tell me, after telling them about getting sexually assaulted myself, oh, well, you put yourself in that situation, you made those choices. And that is so very, very wrong to tell someone that. I haven't had any dreams about abortion. I've had dreams about birth. And I would imagine it's because it really isn't I don't think it's my time yet. I know that dreams about birth have to do many times with you moving into a new stage of your life, and not just moving into a new stage, but like, it's a very creative energy, so it's kind of like you're moving in a new stage of life, and you're going to be creating a whole new version of yourself. So those are dreams about birth. When it comes to abortion, I would probably compare them to dreams about suicide, where, you're kind of cutting the cord with something because it's not working, or it's really not meant for you. You have to nourish that. It's when you have children, it takes a lot of your time, sacrifice, and it takes up a lot of your life. So, an abortion, a dream about abortion, is most likely about, like, maybe cutting the cord or pulling the plug with something in your life, because it's gonna take up way more than it should, and it's not really part of your life path. So you need to kind of steer away from it, because it's just gonna detour you from your actual life path. So that's what I would imagine dreams about abortion are about. That's from my experience of interpreting dreams. That's what I would say they're about. So guys, thank you again for tuning in. Please always tune in, and if you're live with me, please interact with me. Please. I say it every time. I'm not gonna stop saying it. I really want to have people call in. I really want to have you, interact and feature on my episodes. It's about togetherness. So thank you so much. Like, subscribe, follow all of our pages on whatever platform. We are on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of the above. I actually go live on my personal Instagram, but I'm trying to get better about posting on the actual company Instagram. I have a lot I have to put up on that right now, but we even have Snapchat. So tune in, you guys, and leave a comment, leave us your thoughts. And I think we're gonna come back to this on another episode. We're gonna come back to this topic, definitely. So hopefully, one of you can feature. I'd love to have somebody come in and feature, especially if you're very pro-feminist rights. Come on down, let's talk about it. But I'm gonna sign off for now, and tune in for next time, alright? We're gonna put one out next week, obviously, and, I wish you all many blessings.